Welcome forward to Chapter 2 of Jesus' Course in Miracles, page 11. The proper use of defense is quite widely recognized, but their proper use had not been sufficiently understood as yet. They can indeed create man's perception, both of himself and of the world. They can distort or correct depending on what you use them for. Denial should be directed only to error, and projection should be reserved only for truth. You should try to give as you have truly received. The golden rule can work effectively only on this basis. Intellectualization is a term which stems from the mind-brain confusion. Right-mindedness is the device which defends the right mind and gives it control over the body. Intellectualization implies a split, while right-mindedness involves healing. Withdrawal is properly employed in the service of withdrawing from the meaningless. It is not a device for escape, but for consolidation. There is only one mind. Disassociation is quite similar. You should split off or disassociate yourself from error, but only in defense of integration. Detachment is essentially a weaker form of dissociation. Flight can be undertaken in whatever direction you choose, but note that the concept itself implies flight from something. Flight from error is perfectly appropriate. Destination can be properly used as a way of putting distance between yourself and what you should fly from. Regression is an effort to return to your own original state. It can thus be utilized to restore rather than to go back to the less mature. Sublimation should be a redirection of effort to the sublime. There are many other so-called dynamic concepts which are profound errors due essentially to the misuse of defenses. Among them is the concept of different levels of aspiration, which actually result from level confusion. However, the main point to be understood from this selection is that you can defend truth as well as error, and, in fact, much better. The means are easier to clarify after the value of the goal itself is firmly established. Everyone defends his own treasure. You do not have to tell him to do so, because he will do it automatically. The real question still remains: what do you treasure, and how much do you treasure? Once you have learned to consider these two questions and to bring them all your action as the true criteria for behavior, I will have little difficulty in clarifying the means. You have not learned to be content about this as yet. I have therefore concentrated on showing you that the means are available whenever you ask. You can, however, save a lot of time if you do not extend this step unduly. The correct focus will shorten it immeasurably. The atonement is the only defense which cannot be used destructively. That is because while everyone must eventually join it, it is not a device which was generated by man. The atonement principle was in effect long before atonement itself began. The principle was love, and the atonement itself was an act of love. Acts were not necessary before the separation, because the time-space belief did not exist. It was only after the separation that the defense of atonement and the necessary conditions for its fulfillment were planned. It became increasingly apparent that all the defenses which man should choose to use constructively or destructively were not enough to save him. It was therefore decided that he needed a defense which was so splendid that he could not misuse it, although he could refuse it. His choice could not, however, turn it into a weapon of attack, which is inherent characteristics of all other defenses. The atonement thus becomes the only defense which is not a two-edged sword. The atonement actually begins long before the crucifixion. Many souls offered their efforts on behalf of the separated ones, but they could not withstand the strength of the attack and had to be brought back. Angels came too, but their protection did not suffice, because the separated ones were not interested in peace. They had already split their minds, and were bent on further dividing rather than integrating. The levels they introduced into their mind turned against each other, and they established differences, divisions, cleavages, dispersions, and all the other concepts related to the increasing split which they produced. Not being in their right minds, they turned their defenses from protection to assault, and acted literally insanely. It was essential to introduce a split-proof device, which could used only to heal. Let me say that again. It was essential to introduce a split-proof device which could be used only to heal, if it were used at all. The atonement was built into the space-time belief in order to set a limit on the need for the belief, and ultimately to make learning complete. The atonement is the final lesson. Learning itself, like the classroom in which it occupies, is temporary. The ability to learn has no value when change of understanding is no longer necessary. The eternally creative have nothing to learn. Only after the separation was it necessary to direct the creative forces to learning, because changed behavior had become mandatory. Men can learn to improve their behavior and can also learn to become better and better learners. This serves to bring them into closer and closer accord with the sonship, but the sonship itself is a perfect creation, and perfection is not a matter of degree. Thus, page 11 concludes.